such a pleasure to be back in Ann Arbor, to be back home. My name is Minayo Nasiali, and I'm so honored to be invited to come and speak today. So I arrived in Ann Arbor in August 2004, and I was really bewildered to find in August a distinct chill at night. Aside from studying abroad, I had never lived outside California before. I was only a year outside of undergrad. And by October, I was even more bewildered to discover that the thin little pea coat I had brought with me from California was woefully insufficient for a long, dark, endless. So grad school, like winter, was a bit of a shock for me. My first class, 6:15, still this, right? 6:15 was taught by Val Kivelson and Scott Spector, and it was filled with older, wiser students who had master's degrees, and they kept talking about this guy named Foucault. I've never heard of before. And when they talked about Foucault, I don't know if you've seen this, but they went like this. Yeah. And I thought, this is a really inefficient way to open a chart. But it really adds to that a lot of texture and meaning to whatever they're saying. Let me fast forward quite a bit. I defended dissertation, which was an urban and colonial history of Marseille in 2010. Then I moved back to California, where I did a postdoc at Berkeley. In 2011, I started my tenure-track job at the University of Arizona, and I was there for 5 years. I spent most of my time there learning how to be an assistant professor and working on my book in East Grad. So in 2016, I moved to the UCLA History Department. My book came out that same year. I did my tenure dossier that year, and about a year and a half later, I got the final word that my promotion had been approved. Okay, so I'm actually going to spend most of my time talking about graduate school, frankly, and the few years following my time in graduate school. I'll move now into my talk. So, kidogo kidogo, hujaza kipato. I heard this phrase frequently growing up. In fact, I can't remember a time when I didn't hear it, but I didn't know what it meant. So my dad grew up in Kenya, rural Kenya. He spoke Swahili, he spoke Lugoli, he spoke English. But at home, here in the States, we only spoke English. So finally, at some point, I asked my dad, okay, so what does this phrase mean? He said, little by little fills the jar. So I thought I'd bring in a picture, why not, of my dad's family, early family, because he went on to have 8 more siblings. So here's my dad when he's 5. He's exactly because he's the height of my grandfather. Here's my dad, Opani, my grandfather, Joshua, my grandmother, Rebecca Minayo, I'm named from, and Aunt Jade, who's since died. Here they are in their Sunday best. My grandmother was a very religious Quaker. Leave that for another day. Okay. So, this phrase has come to be very meaningful for me, and one that has really resonated with me and motivated me at different stages in my career. And I just want to spend a few minutes talking about 2 of those moments. ABD. So before I left for my dissertation research here in France, in 2007, I asked my advisors for advice about what to do in the archive. And I remember Jeff Ely leaned back in his chair and he said, you have to go to the archive. You have to sit. I said, you have to go to the archive. He said, you have to sit there. You have to sit in the archive. Now, I had never been to an archive before, so I really didn't know what you meant, but I diligently took notes, and off I went to Marseille. And once there, I was miserable. So so lonely. Everybody I knew was in Paris. I was down south. I lived in this miserable apartment that was always like blowing fuses because the wiring was faulty. It's full of mosquitoes. And the only real structure I could give to my day was to go to the archive. Zip. And sit there and figure it out. And so it became a habit. I went every day when it opened, and I left when it closed. I took copious notes, I took tons of pictures, and every night when I got home, this is good for family, I cataloged all the day's documents. And importantly, my archive extended deep into the neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods where I lived, and was shaped by the stories and experiences of my neighbors and their everyday lives in Marseille. So little by little, I compiled a serious and diverse collection of data, personal stories, and other documents. Now, I have 2 kids now. One's 3 and one's 7 months old. And this practice, when I go off to do research, is still there. That habit is still there of thinking about ways to make the archival research, my time there when I'm in France and in the UK, a practice every day. So I came back to Ann Arbor in the summer of 2008, and I love summers in Ann Arbor. I was especially glad to be back after my year of solitude, see my friends, and was talking at the park, the bang, does it still happen, the bang at the Flying Pig? No. Obama was about to be elected. But I remember being afraid that if I didn't start writing soon, that I might just not do it. So I forced myself to start writing the first chapter. And at first, I made myself write 2 pages every day. And it was garbage. It was bad. But slowly, it got easier. I made myself finish it by the end of the summer. And I was really proud of that first chapter. It was about squatters. I was mostly proud that I wrote it, even though it was a mess. Okay, shifting now to the second phrase. So I've never worked as hard as when I was a first-year assistant professor. All of a sudden, I had to do way more. I had way more to do than just write a dissertation. I had to teach. Each new lecture took me 8 hours to write. Undergrads wanted mentoring. I sat on graduate committees. I had to learn to write letters of recommendation. And as the only person of color in my department at that time, I felt a real commitment and sense of duty, especially to mentor both undergraduate and graduate students. So I realized I had to find a way to protect my time. I had to carve out a portion of my day, every day, and devote it to writing and research. I said to myself, okay, when am I at my smartest? In the mornings. All right, the mornings is when I work. So I didn't check email until after my writing time. I didn't schedule classes until after my writing time. I didn't schedule meetings with colleagues until after my writing time. Now, of course, I was collegial, did my fair share of departmental work, but I also felt that as a junior professor, I had kind of limited social capital. So maybe we can talk about the Q&A perhaps. And I decided to use that social capital to protect my time so I could write every day. So let me kind of take a step back to graduate school. So I suffered from a paralyzing case of imposter syndrome when I began graduate school. I don't think it really went away until my 3rd year as an assistant prof at U of A. And even now, I still have the occasional pain. Even last night, we had to go around these introductions last night. And I thought, uh-oh. I think I came to the wrong, I'm just here for the food. Now, I want to acknowledge this, for me, kind of personal anxiety, that I'm smart enough, that I don't belong, because I think, I don't want to talk about intimate matters, but I suspect it's a rather common feeling. I know Jackie talked about it last night, and it's a feeling that I think merits some analysis collectively. So I have some advice. I didn't know the term existed as a graduate student, so I kind of wish, the things I wish I had known in graduate school. So I want you to think for a second of the typical geography of a grad seminar room. There's the main table, right? Then there's the border of chairs, the lines, the back of the room, and the margins and the outskirts of the table. That's where I used to sit, back home. I didn't want to be seen. I was petrified of talking. But at some point, perhaps, I can't remember when, the end of grad school, maybe it was from my postdoc year, I moved. I started to sit, it's very simple actually, I started to sit at the main table. And slowly, by being an actual physical presence at the main table, even if I didn't speak, I began to feel more comfortable. And I talk about it today because it's something you can do now. Sit up front at conferences, sit at the table in crowded grad seminars. For one thing, when I sat at the table, it was easier to figure out the politics of things. Instead of being afraid of being seen, I began to pay attention to the game and how it was played. And as a woman and as a person of color, I also came to realize that my presence mattered at the table. And ultimately, my input mattered if I wanted to make significant structural, institutional changes. So after a while, I began to sit big. So I think often of one of Mary Kelly's books, which came out when I was here at Michigan, Learning to Stand and Speak. And that title really characterizes the process that I had to go to. I had to prove to myself and often compete with myself hard to convince myself that I belonged. So now I'm on the other side, so graduate admissions committees, so forth, and I really have a good sense of how much graduate students are wanted. We're often fighting for who gets to work with graduate students, who gets to teach graduate courses. And I always wanted to make the point that I think many faculty feel responsible to get to know, to embrace the whole student, which is something that Kaka had talked about earlier in our work with graduate students. Okay, this has actually come up quite a bit today, so I'm going to give you my take. So I mentioned that one way that I tried to kind of get over my imposter syndrome was by competing with myself, which isn't always pretty, but it does have some positive results. I learned that it didn't hurt to go big, to swing for the fences. And again, this is a theme we've heard about quite a bit at this conference. I told myself that the worst thing that could happen is that I would just get rejected. If somebody would say no, and I would just have to try again. Now, as the theme of this conference suggests, there are a diversity of creative and meaningful ways to take chances. And I'm going to share just 2 ways that worked for me in my career. The first is the cold call. This is a version of networking. I started to reach out to scholars whose work, and activists later in my career, activists in France, later in my career, whose work I admired, but I just didn't know. And of course, they didn't know me. And I figured that politely asking somebody if they are available for coffee just really couldn't hurt, and it paid off. Those cold calls led to a postdoc and then to my current job. I also want to talk about publications, the peer-reviewed kind. We haven't talked about that at this conference yet. I know it hasn't been the focus, but I think that it's an important part of the conversation. So in my first year at Arizona, I decided to submit an article to the American Historical Review. It was about squatters, it was actually that first chapter, housing rights and race in post-World War II France, and it also engaged with the kind of ongoing housing crisis at the time. And it got accepted. I'm not talking about this to brag. I say this, I'm talking about this, but I think everybody should kind of give it a try to see what happens. I learned a lot from that review process. Exceptional amount. It was very grueling, but importantly, I learned how to participate and ultimately, and I think significantly, to question the production of knowledge. Which leads me to my next point. Going big also means you have to embrace criticism and profit from it, something we also haven't yet talked about in this conference. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but I'm going to do it. Yeah. No, I don't have time to do it. I was going to share some of my reviews from HR, because they were harsh, but they were good. I'll do it quickly. Kiana, this is time for our audience participation. You ready?
Sure.
Okay, number 1.
What is the point?
What is the point? That was the first thing I read.
The author fails to...
Right.
At no point does the author...
And my personal favorite,
The author is either ignorant of or uneducated.
So, and I hope I'm not, it's still an anonymous peer review process. So hidden beneath these zingers was good advice for improving the article. But I also had to learn to ignore. I'm going to go over by 3 minutes. Okay. I also had to learn how to ignore some of these zingers, to decide which of, there was good comments aside from the zingers, how to decide how to let my voice and my choice for the article, So, swore a little bit, mumbled, went for a run, gathered myself together, and tackled the revisions. So I just have 2 more bits of advice. Be a mentee. So we often have a very passive understanding of what a mentee is, someone who receives guidance from a mentor. But over the years, I've developed a very active understanding of the word. A mentee is one who seeks advice, training, and counseling from mentors, plural. To put it another way, I think we have to manage our mentors. I mean this in the most respectful way. We have to respect our time and be proactive. And I can give specific examples in the Q&A. And the mentoring relationship can last a lifetime. Nearly 10 years after I defended, Rita Chin coached me when I was interviewing at UCLA. I was also 7.5 months pregnant. Joshua Cole, when I was looking for a publisher for my book and didn't know what to do, wrote a pivotal letter of introduction for me that got my foot in the door. Jeff Ely has helped me negotiate every single job market season I've ever gone through, including negotiating a dual career hire twice. So they've done these things for me and much more, and they've done them for countless others. This brings me to my final slide. Don't pull a ladder up after yourself. And although I have many examples, I'm only going to give one. Dmitry Krause. I don't know if anybody remembers. Dmitry. He's from the Isle of Lesbos. He was very proud of this. Dmitry Krause was a few years ahead of me here at Michigan, and he's a Byzantinist. So the year he defended, he got a job. So when I went on the job market, I thought to myself, okay, he did something right. What was it? And I asked if he would mind sharing his cover letter with me. He immediately said yes, and he sent me along everything else, all the rest of his job materials. Now, I'm not the first in my family to go to college, but I am the first in my family to get a PhD, and the first to have gone to a big old fancy school like Michigan. And although I got a lot of support from my parents, they couldn't really coach me through this process of grad school and beyond. So I really needed role models like Dmitry. So this is why I emphasize the importance of passing along, when you can, your knowledge and expertise to those who come behind you. Thanks very much.